Morning. Hello. Hello. Good morning. Let me turn off the music. All right, so let me turn it off there too. Good. Okay. Hello. Good morning. Welcome to a live stream. This is Electronic Literature Section 1, and let me do that. Okay. And this is a live stream lecture for students in my class, and so if you are online, please do as you are. Continue to do as you are doing, which is to say good morning via Discord, which is what's showing up here. I still don't know why Discord sometimes when it feeds in through this little widget, it shows up as object instead of the actual the actual thing it says. Yeah, what time zone are you in, Patrick? If it's you're saying good night. I mean, I hope you have a good night or had a good night, but I'm wondering. It is not night here, although it feels like it. It's dark and rainy and cold. It's kind of not a great morning, but that's all right. I'm happy to be here with you all. So this is, again, this is a live stream for my class. I mentioned that because I'm streaming this through Twitch and YouTube, and I just got a whole bunch of YouTube subscribers because a video that I uploaded a few months ago is getting a ton of views for some reason, and so people are subscribing to me hoping that I will be making more content like that, and I guess I can, but that's not what I primarily do, so that's what's going on with that. It's a video I made where it's a supercut of just the breathing sounds from the 2020 presidential debate between Trump and Biden. It's kind of a dumb video, I thought. Not my favorite video of that genre that I've produced, but I guess people are enjoying it. So it's approaching 50,000 views, which is a lot for me. So like it's kind of, kind of cool, I guess. But it's still kind of surprising that it's getting so much attention over the last few days. And I think it seems to be coming from YouTube's recommendation algorithm. Like it's recommending it to people for some reason. So I guess they're enjoying it because they're commenting on it, which is great, I guess. But that's not what this is. This is a lecture for my class, and so I'm going to be talking about, as you see here, well, you don't see because I haven't shared the whole thing yet, the computer-generated books. And this is kind of a surprise topic in that I did not actually have anything on the schedule about this. I mean, I knew I wanted to talk about it, wasn't sure exactly when, and also wasn't sure exactly what to do today, and so those two things came together in a decision to talk about this today, which is computer-generated books, which is a topic I really like, I'm really interested in. I'm working on various scholarly and research things related to this, and also my own computer-generated book projects. So this is something that I'm pretty excited to talk about, and I could probably talk for a lot about this, but I will basically be talking about today, and Wednesday will be kind of part 2 of the lecture, but you'll be involved more on Wednesday because this is a week where some of you will be attending in person. Right, let me move into this. So I do have some notes for the Wikipedians, but just to remind you, I actually forgot to add this here. I can just do this right now, right? This is an odd week. So this is week 13. This is an odd week, so odd cohorts will meet in person, and really for the last time, great, because like the next week will be an even week, and that's week 14, and then I guess, or is there a week 15? I forget how it works, but I think this is the second to last full week of classes, so this will be it basically for the odd cohort. So kind of strange, it seems to be ending really abruptly, but it's not really ending, of course. We'll just be online for the remainder and then kind of see things through. Cool, so let me go ahead and share this slideshow, and then I'll show you some things and take you all through it. Nope, I don't want you all to edit this. Hang on. What's it doing? What's happening? I don't know what I clicked on. I clicked on the wrong thing. I don't want anyone to edit this because this is mine. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so I'm going to share the slides for today. Actually, a fair amount of information in these slides, and I was kind of packing a lot in, I think, but still just I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. But I wanted to cover this topic kind of on my own because it's mentioned in our textbook, the electronic literature textbook, but kind of briefly, and I feel like I know a lot more about it, so I wanted to spend some time talking about it today, which is this topic here, computer-generated books. So let's see. Let me make this. I'm gonna make this full screen or full browser, like I like to do. I like to do it this way because it lets me control it and then also have multiple tabs in view at the same time. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, so there we go. And here we go. Okay, so this is, as you see, I do have 2 workshops scheduled for Wikipedians. These are optional. I didn't ask you when you were available, so I just put these 2 times on my calendar, and I made one morning, one afternoon, in case that makes it more possible for more people to be there. You can attend one or both or neither, honestly, but I think it'll be helpful, so I encourage you to attend them if you can. And yeah, it'll be on Zoom. It'll just be a link. I'll set up a new thing, and I'll invite everybody to it. I'll send just an announcement saying, everybody in the class, here's the Wikipedia thing. But of course, if you're a Wikipedian, you should feel, you should be the ones that's primarily for. Of course, anyone's welcome. But do that. I'm going to have the assignments figured out tonight, which is, when I say assignments, I mean I'm going to align you each with a person to kind of take primary responsibility for. And then we'll, in our workshop, maybe do a little bit of coordinating of I think having copy edit groups or peer review groups of some sort would be helpful, so that you're collaborating in that sense, but still kind of the lead on each article. If you have a strong feeling about these, I mean, many of you did kind of say things in your proposals, and I will look through those again, but I'll double check those again as I'm aligning these and making these assignments. But if you have a strong preference for someone, let me know. If there's more than one person that have a strong preference, I think I will probably still have to decide, just give it to one or the other, and I'll probably just flip a coin or something. But that's the idea. I want to have at least one. I want to have ideally one person per article, and then yeah, that's it. And then just remember, if you are a Wikipedian and you haven't already done this, you should create an account on Wikipedia. I actually made a new account. When I made my initial account, I used my real name, but then I noticed if you go to create an account, they actually recommend using a more anonymous name, and it's not required, but it's sort of their preference, and so I decided to make a new one. If you already made an account and you used your real name, that's fine. That's your name. You don't have to change it, but just know that will be public. Every edit you make will be logged with that username. And as far as I can tell, it's very difficult to change a username after you've created it. So, that's, if you feel strongly about that you would really prefer a more anonymous username, just go ahead and redo that. So you should still have time to get through the 4-day threshold that you need in order to create an article. And then start editing. I've done 2 or 3 edits so far on my new account. I can't even remember what they were, but I did a few little things that I found. It is kind of hard though when you think I need to, because every now and then you're on Wikipedia and you see something that needs to be fixed, but when you go looking for that, that's your only reason to be on Wikipedia. It's where do I start? You might want to look at current events. There might be some things that are emerging information. That might be something. Oh yeah, or just kind of random things, random little facts that as long as you have a citation for it. I added one to, yeah, I just remembered one I added. So the cicadas, right? I mean, they're getting ready to emerge probably in a few weeks. I don't know exactly when they're going to come out, but Brood X is the brood this year, and I just added. Oh, interesting. My edit has been retracted. Let me see if I can figure out why. I did make an edit to this to add a reference that Brood X was referenced in a graphic novel that I really like, and it seems like someone may have reverted my edit. Let me see why. Maybe they didn't. Okay, so the new information lacks citation to source. Okay, so that was, molecule is my username, and Corker1 looks like reverted my edit. So I think I need to fix that, but I can add that reference. And that makes sense. I needed a citation for that. Okay, anyway, that's the kind of thing that you can start doing, and just to get the sense of that. Okay, so let's move on, unless there's any questions. I see someone typing, so I'll let you finish your thought if it's a question about Wikipedia or other logistical things, and then we'll jump into it. Oh, and there is some homework. I really want to make sure I have time to explain that homework. I have explained it in the assignment page for it, and you've seen a Google Doc related to it. So, yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. That's really good. That's a really useful link. If you could add that to the wiki, the resources channel in Discord, right? That would be really helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so let me talk about computer-generated books. I'm gonna do it for a while. So here we go. Computer-generated books. What are we talking about here? Just a simple definition of things where we're talking about computer-generated prose. Now there are two kind of layers to this. There is just the idea of getting a computer to generate a story, and then there's the idea of getting a computer to do something that results in a book. And there is a slight, there is a nuanced distinction between those two, but for the sake of this discussion, I'm more or less treating those as synonymous. And when we talk about computer-generated text in this format, we've already touched on poetry, right? Like digital poetry, and combinatory poetics, and we can think of that as a kind of generation, right? So I'm not going to get into the weeds with what, composition versus generation versus authorship. I mean, there's a whole set of things to look at there, but just in a very basic sense, we're talking about text that's composed as the result of executing a computer program. And we mean, in this case, prose text, as opposed to poetry. And sometimes we'll see examples as I show you that, the distinction between prose and poetry is kind of hard to make, but that's not really that important at this point. But I am trying to focus on prose books for this lecture today. And that's what most of my examples are going to be about. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about studying this, or trying to think about like what is the long history or the precursor to the computer-generated book, is that the idea existed before it was possible. So people, writers, as you see here on this slide, like Jonathan Swift in Gulliver's Travels, conceived the idea of a computer-generated book long before that was even remotely possible. And there's actually a couple others, but this one is pretty well known and also has a nice visual associated with it. And it is this thing here. It's described as a frame, but it is definitely a machine. And so it's mechanical, but it's doing the same kind of operation that a lot of contemporary text generators do, which is randomly putting symbols together until something kind of makes sense, and then saving that, and then trying to riff on it. So I should make this a link. It is from the island of Laputa, I think it's how you say that. I hope you are familiar with Gulliver's Travels, mostly well known for the visits to the island of Lilliput and Brobdingnag and Houyhnhnm, but he also goes to Laputa, or is it Laputa? I forget. And then this is a flying island, and so let's just take a look at it here on Project Gutenberg, which is the best place to find books like this. This is a book written in 1726, or published in 1726, and it purports to be the travel log of Lemuel Gulliver, who is a doctor, and for various reasons gets to explore a bunch of exotic and strange islands. I mean, it's a famous, work of literature. So this is from part 3, as you see, Laputa, and yeah, you're right. So just mentioned the 1930s animated movie. It's a really gorgeous rotoscoped early example of like really kind of high quality, elegant, classical style animation. So yeah, I'm familiar with that one. I think it was the Fleischer brothers who did that. Maybe not. They did a lot of rotoscoping in that time period. Anyway, so this is, let me see, where's the frame? I gotta find it here. Well, I'm just doing this here. It is described as a machine. There it is, okay. And the image I have on the slide is just, I inverted it so it fit the theme of my my slideshow. But this is a picture of it, and you can, there's a bit of text here. I don't want to stand here and read it to you, but the basic context of this is an island where they have all these lofty ideas, and that's characterized by like the island that is literally flying. And so the capital city is this realm of like high achievement in the arts and sciences, but because this is a work of satire, the the running theme throughout all of the fantastical inventions and ideas that exist in this place is that they are completely impractical and have had no impact on the lives of the citizens of this kingdom. And so they're all actually suffering in poverty because all of the resources of this kingdom have been devoted to these intellectual pursuits that have no actual purpose or use. And so this is kind of the context for this, and this is proposed within that context as essentially a joke. And you could say the same thing about many of the works I'm going to show you today, that they're interesting, but they kind of have no practical purpose, and that's okay with me, right? I mean, we're doing literature, so we can think about different kinds of purposes. But in the context of this book, it's an example of, or Jonathan Swift meant this to be a critique of kind of purely intellectual pursuits. But this is the idea. But basically, these symbols here are the symbols of the language of this island, and then these symbols on the sides, these are like cranks. I mean, but it kind of looks like an integrated circuit. It just generically, as though it had wires coming into the sides. But the idea is that you would have different people, like each of these cranks would have a student on it turning it, and then someone else would, I think they call out the symbols and then record them, and then the professor whose research project this is, he collects the results in books, and whenever it sort of makes sense. And his theory is basically that eventually they're going to cover every conceivable topic in its entirety, right? If they just keep doing it, they're eventually going to make every conceivable book through this system, and thus sort of complete the arts and sciences by doing this. But as you can see, it doesn't really work out that way, as you can imagine. So it's kind of a joke project, but still pretty interesting. Okay, so that's the Laputian frame. So another instance, and this one is a bit of a passing reference, but I think I kind of like it again for the context. So this is a 1909 short story by E.M. Forster. It's called The Machine Stops. I frequently assign this in my Intro to Digital Studies class or similar classes. And the idea is it's a world, it's a future dystopian kind of world where every need that humans have is fulfilled by machines. And so each human, everyone lives in these like individual cells, and they have these buttons that they use to do whatever they need to get done. So as you can see, there was a hot bath button, by pressure of which a basin of imitation marble rose out of the floor, filling to the brim with a warm deodorized liquid. There was the cold bath button. There was the button that produced literature. And there were, of course, the buttons by which she communicated with her friends. So again, this is kind of in the context of a work that is basically satirical, but more acerbic and sharp than Jonathan Swift's work. It's actually really a science fiction short story. And the idea is that all of these humans' needs and ideas are completely handled by the machine. They mention later, the title is The Machine Stops. As the machine starts breaking down, the books that it produces are worse. Like there's all the other problems, but that's another mention of the literature that it produces. It's lower quality as the machine starts to fall apart, which is what happens at the end of the story. And then it's all pretty dark in the end. Actually, it's pretty. There's a real tone of like meanness in this story, I think, that is not often talked about enough, especially with regard to this main character, whose name is Vashti. There's a typo there in this copy for some reason. Anyway, that's it. All right, so here's another example, another short story, 1952 short story by Arthur C. Clarke, and this is a story where, as you see in the summary, a group of Tibetan monks have committed themselves to the task of writing down every name of God, and they've calculated that number is 9 billion, and so they are attempting to write all of them down. They realize that it would be easier if they had a computer help them do that, and so they do that. The problem is that they believe that, or in their belief system, the idea of writing down the names of God, they believe that is the purpose of existence. Like that is the reason the universe exists, is so that the names of God can be denoted. And so, spoiler alert, at the end of the story, when the computer helps them succeed in this task, the stars start going out. And so it's this like ominous ending. But it's this idea of like using computational permutations to go iterate through every possible name of God in their symbology. There's up to 9 letters long, and there's 3 different letters. And so like, there's a way that they figured it out. But that idea of permutating through all the possible names of God is something that we can do with a computer, right? I mean, things that we would take a very long time, and as they calculate here, it's going to take them 15,000 years to do it by hand. A computer could do it in a much shorter amount of time. The exact amount of time would vary depending on what you would need it to do. But the problem, it turns out, is, I mean, there is still problems with this kind of thing. I have not actually attempted. I'm not sure if it would be possible to do it with the example they've described here. But Nick Montfort created a work called The Names of God, and if you run it on your computer, it'll fill up your memory on your computer. It'll potentially crash your computer if you run it. But it doesn't like kill your computer. It just locks it up because it takes up all the available memory pretty quickly. So that's that's another. But anyway, the idea of like a computer being used to, like a fictional work that uses a computer in it. There is, I forgot to do a slide about it, but there's another book, a short story by Roald Dahl about a computer that can write stories, can generate fiction. I feel like I've been trying to find other examples of this from like the early 20th century, and I feel like there are others. I don't have a complete exhaustive list yet, but these are examples that I'm aware of. I feel like there was a Star Trek episode where a computer, like an early Star Trek episode, where there was a computer that seemed to have creative impulses. Obviously, in Next Generation, Commander Data was a painter, and I think he tried poetry. But I'm looking in the 1960s. I'm trying to see if there was any in the 1960s series. So if you know of one, let me know. I'm trying to think of that, or anything else, right? Any other kinds of, middle or early 20th century references to a computer that can create books or literature. Okay, so let's look at some early examples. Some early examples of actual computer-generated books, and there are several, and there's several of these that make the claim to be the first computer-generated book. I am not going to commit to one. I mean, well, I guess I will. I have a candidate that I want to put forward, but it might be controversial in the sense that it really depends on how you define computer-generated book. So I take that into consideration. But this is my argument. This is a book called A Million Random Digits with 100,000 Normal Deviates by the Rand Corporation in 1955. Now, this is a book that is exactly what the title says, and it's a fascinating book to look at. I don't have a copy with me. It's kind of a collector's item to get the first edition, but I was able to get it from Interlibrary Loan recently and spend some time with it. This is not my photo of it, but I took several photos of it because I was interested in how it looked. And as you can see, it is exactly what it says. It's literally a table of random numbers, a million of them, and so it's and they're indexed, so you can look up a specific random number in it, which I think is interesting. But this had a purpose. This was not produced as literature, but there are literary forms that consist of mostly numbers, or like I talked about last week, sound poetry. And sound poetry does not have to have any semantic meaning at all. Numbers probably don't have semantic meaning, and so you could imagine a reading of this as poetry that would, might not be popular, or it might not be, it might not fit everyone's definition of poetry, but you could consider it poetry, and not be completely unreasonable in that. But it's a fascinating book. The reason that the Rand Corporation published this book was not for literary purposes. It was to help in statistical research, doing different kinds of statistical research into stochastic systems, specifically things like cryptography. It's useful to have a large set of high quality random numbers, and so that's what Rand produced here. And high quality random numbers means that they are truly random, and there's a whole it's really a philosophical question, like what is a random number? In a computational sense, anything that has been produced as a result of an algorithm, you might say is pseudo-random, so it's not truly random. We talked about this way back when we talked about combinatorial poetics a little bit, but these are high-quality random numbers, meaning that it's very difficult to find patterns within it, and patterns are what you need if you're making some kind of cryptographic attack on some information system. And so this is what they were used for. Anyway, I think it's a really fascinating book to look at. It has been reissued. So this is the 1955 first edition. It looks like this. Although I noticed on Amazon, if you look at this one, it's actually called the 0th edition. And yeah, so yeah, thanks for sharing the link, Patrick. I'm gonna see, is this? Oh, that's not bad. Yeah. Well, this is the new edition. So this is the 2000. I think anyway. At least that cover goes with the 2001 edition of it. You can also read the whole thing online for free. So if you want to save some money, you can get it that way. The paperback is the newer edition, I think. The hardcover is the 1955 first edition, or as I noticed on Amazon, it was actually listed as the 0th edition, which is, in computer programming, you usually start counting with 0 instead of 1, and so it kind of makes sense that they would call that the 0th edition. So it was published in 1955, but the numbers, I believe, were actually generated in 1947. So it's historical. It's old. All right. So moving ahead a little bit. So I think there were other examples in the 1960s. What's his name? Grimes. So I can't remember the first name. Grimes had a fairy tale generator in the 1960s, I think. But I don't, as far as I know, and I don't have a slide for Grimes, but as far as I know, that never resulted in a published book, and so it was only kind of relatively recently discovered by a researcher, so if we're building a full like this, I'm not giving you the exhaustive lineage of these things here today. I'm just kind of hitting a few highlights, but that one does kind of go between these two in time periods if we are going to look at it that way. So Sheldon Klein was a computer scientist, and he produced a work in 1973 called The Novel Writer. Coded it in Fortran. You can find the source code online, and it uses syntax structures and like story-level syntactical structures, and also like part-of-speech syntactical structures within a sentence to use grammar to generate this kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I should tell you, I'm actually working on my own, like I'm writing a book about this kind of stuff. And so I have a lot of examples and connections in my brain that are going off. But like this whole idea of being able to look at language in a systematic way using part-of-speech tagging to construct coherent grammatical structures, it really builds a lot on that area of computational linguistics, which really gets started in the 1950s, and so like there's a whole like parallel history of storytelling there. But as far as like actually creating story, like narrative, this is a significant early work, and it produces things like this: the day was Monday, the pleasant weather was sunny, Lady Buxley was in the park, James ran into Lady Buxley, James talked with Lady Buxley flirted with James invited Lady Buxley, James liked Lady Buxley liked James, and so on. So it's not exactly very rich prose, but it's recognizable as prose. Like if I asked you what is this, like you would say prose. It is a mystery novel, I guess, and so and it's always, for some reason, in all the references I've seen to this, it always says that it generates 2,100 word mystery stories, which is, I don't know if that's something built into the program that it can only generate that length of story, but I don't know. I'd kind of like to dig into the source code and see if I can recreate it. Maybe Fortran is not a language I'm familiar with, but I don't know. Might be interesting to try. Make a JavaScript version of this. That'd be fun. Okay, so let's move on. So here's another one. This one's another one that is not. I don't think gets recognized as often as it should. And also, like Carol Spear and McCauley, I added her to our list of women in eLit as someone who I think deserves a Wikipedia page. So she published this book, and she did which she referred to what she produced here as computer-assisted writing, but she wrote a whole book about how to do computer-assisted writing, including several examples, and then this is a novel that she produced using this system in 1975. So working about the same time as Sheldon Klein, but kind of on her own. And as far as I know, on her own, I feel like I think there's an interesting kind of research project that needs to happen about her early work. She published a bit, but it's still kind of obscure and is not connected with the main line of electronic literature research as well as it should be, I think. So this is the book, and the premise of this book, the plot is it's a group of women who survive a plane crash and then have to kind of survive in the woods on their own, and they make their way back to civilization, and then different things happen along the way. I have not actually read the whole thing, but this is the idea. I wanted to show you the cover and the title page here because it's very much signaling its computeriness, right? So the title is printed in this font, which is called Moore Computer. That's Moore Computer. It was a fairly popular font in the 70s, especially to indicate something that needed to look computery and or have something to do with computers. It's an interesting font because if you look at it, I'm kind of going off on the font here a little bit, but if you look at these like weird like rectangles, like the one at the bottom of the N, and like this sort of looks like a chunky serif on the bottom of the L, and like these extra little dots and blips there. So that is, I'm blanking on the, I know the ISO standard that's referencing, but I'm blanking on the name of it right now, all of a sudden. It's something 13. It's E something 13. Man, I'm blanking on that number. Okay, anyway, this is, if you look at the way numbers are written on checks or even on like credit cards still, numbers are written using a certain style of writing that can be recognized by magnetic character recognition technology. That's a kind of precursor, not precursor, but an alternative, I guess, to optical character recognition technology. And these things were printed with magnetic ink. And so these little blips and blops are there to make the letters look significantly different enough from each other that relatively low, by our standards, low resolution magnetic reader can pick up those differences. So we're talking 1950s. That was created just with a set of numbers and a few control characters. And then I don't know who Moore is. I spent some time trying to figure out who created the full alphabet. And so the alphabet is not actually part of the data standard, but it was designed to look like the data standard, to make it look computery, and that you see it in uses like this. Sorry, I have a lot to say about this. And then you get sort of variations on it like this. So this, I don't know what this one is because More Computer did not have a lowercase, but this obviously does have lowercase or minuscule letters. But they look a little different, right? Anyway, I'm going to need to spend some more time with that. So this is so Carol Spear and McCauley writes this. This is an explicitly feminist work, like it's written in that with that in mind, and kind of has this idea in it. You've got this quote here, and then I've got a few. I have an excerpt on the page, but it's basically prose for the most part, but then you have these little kind of computational looking interjections throughout it. There's one of the characters is a computer programmer, and so it's kind of implied that that's her point of view being expressed as code and kind of as code poetry, but it also seems to be generating certain points within it. And there's some unusual like layout things that happen in terms of this. And really just, I think, a pretty interesting work, and also a very readable work. She called this computer-assisted writing, so she was very upfront about the fact that she was composing part of this, and that relationship between the author and, like, the human author and the computer author is something that some authors have tried to obscure or are not entirely forthcoming about. And so this is, I think, kind of nice that she was very forthcoming about it. It makes sense. And of course, you can read this online as I am. This is on archive.org, where most of these things are, and yeah, it's great. I've not actually seen or been able to get a hold of a physical copy of it yet, but I will try to. But yeah, if you want to write a Wikipedia article about her, I think that would be great. I might if you don't. So anyway, so the Policeman's Beard is half constructed. Of course, we've seen this a while ago, but it's still worth mentioning. And this is also, like I was saying, this is an example of a work that the relationship between the computer and the human is a little bit. I think the authors of this work benefit a little bit by making that less clear. Like they kind of put out in front the idea, like they really emphasize the idea that this is the first book by a computer. Find the right tab. Where am I? This book is available in our. I've uploaded a PDF of it to our Canvas course, so you can look at it there if you want. And perhaps you already have because we talked about it a while ago. But it's also here on archive.org. It's unusually the scan is unusually dark on archive.org for some reason. But you can take a look at it. The artwork is amazing, and it's here. It's kind of an easier way to reference it here on archive.org. But as we talked about, and as you've seen from looking at it, they really put this on the cover, the first book ever written by a computer. And I've given you so far at least 2 examples that predated it, but it doesn't really matter. But it's still not exactly true. Okay, so let's move on. This is another really significant, not a specific project, but a code base, like an approach to generating text that turned out to be really influential. So this is Travesty Generator for Micros. It's a computer program, and it's written in Pascal. But this is the context here. This is a computer magazine, Byte magazine, and so that context I think is important. If you look at Like this is a book, I mean, this is an issue all about a whole bunch of new microchips that just came out. That's the big theme. I always kind of like the covers for these, and like seeing all the ads for like printers and stuff. Like it's just a cool bit of computer history to look through these. And this is also, as you can see, an enormously long. What is Lennon doing here? Anyway, so was that Lennon or Khrushchev? Anyway, so that there it is. So this is kind of an unusual article for this magazine. This is a I just saw somebody saying good morning on Twitch. Yeah, good morning. So anyway, this is travesty generated for micros, and what they're doing is explaining a method by which you can computationally derive the style of something or express the style of a certain bit of writing as a statistical concept and then reproduce that statistical concept in a new composition, or whether it's basically rearrange the contents in a way that sounds like the same thing. It's kind of hard to explain. You know, it feels very abstract. It's easier to see it if you can write some code that kind of does it and spend some time looking at the code. But basically, they explain it really well in this here, which is, let me zoom in on their explanation. So finish typing a page of English prose, and the key you hit most often will have been the spacebar. Either E or T will rank second. You did not make those decisions, the language did. In fact, the language makes 3/4 of your writing decisions for you. Not only do the letters observe preferred frequencies, they keep preferred company. A familiar example, write Q, and unless you're drafting a Qantas ad or some comments on Iraq, the next character is almost sure to be you. So I think that makes sense, and you can apply that same concept to words as well. So words have preferred frequencies and preferred company, and you can quantify those, and then you could express, you can make a new arrangement of text that follows those same quantifications, and then make something that ultimately sounds like the style of another writer whose work you programmed your database with. And so this is very similar to the approach using Markov chains to generate text, and that's something I can, I will not have time in this lecture today, but I can show you sometime later, I guess. Yeah, travesty generators for micros. So I need to move on. Okay, so this is another one. I just found this cover. I found this image really funny, so that's why I used this one. This was an image used in a New York Times article about this book. This is a book called Justice Once by Scott French and Hal, which is the name he gave to the computer program that he collaborated with on this. The purpose of this collaboration was to produce a novel in the style of Jacqueline Suzanne, and I think it was pretty successful. I'm not really familiar with her work that much, but it reads very well. Like, it reads very straightforwardly, like a kind of a cheesy novel, and it's hard to tell that it was written by a computer. In fact, I'm kind of suspicious of that. It maybe, it's not at all clear to me as I read it where the computer ends and where Scott French begins, if that makes sense. Like, so he says he wrote about, he's in his various interviews, he says the computer wrote about 25% of it by itself, and he added about 10%, and then the rest of it was the two of them collaborating. So I'm not sure what he means by that. Like, I'm not sure if he means he added like the punctuation or like the character names or like the plot structures. And I really wish we could look at the source code. I've not been successful at really finding out much about this book or this creator, this person, since the 90s, basically. So I'm still kind of looking for that, and I'd like to know more about it because it seems like a pretty successful experiment if you think of it as an experiment. It actually led to a legal battle with the estate of Jacqueline Suzanne because he presented this as like a new novel by Jacqueline Suzanne, and it's very clearly saying I'm writing. It's not a hoax, but I don't remember actually how the legal thing came out. But that was at least a question raised by this book, was like, can you copyright a style, basically? And I don't know. Okay, here's another example. This is a program called Brutus, and Selmer Bringsjord and David Ferrucci wrote this, and this is just an example of its output. Brutus is very complex on the inside and very much well documented as a kind of research project in computer science to produce prose. I think that it's interesting that this example that they provide is about the university and this idea of ivy-covered clock towers. It almost seems like a reference to or an echo of Gulliver's observations about Laputa, and it's the Academy of Science that was ultimately impractical. So I'm kind of curious about that. But this is prose generated by Brutus. Dave Atwood loved the university. He loved its ivy-covered clock towers, its ancient and sturdy brick, and its sun-splashed verdant greens and eager youth. I mean, those are some nice phrases. Like, this is some decent writing, I think. I don't know to what extent it composed those or sampled them from elsewhere and put it in place, but it's still pretty interesting. And so this is 1999 as it's producing that, so that's pretty good. Okay, so there are many more examples in the early 2000s, and I don't have time for those. I wanted to make sure to talk about Nanogenmo because that's what your homework consists of for Wednesday, or that is about. So this is essentially part 1 of a lecture, and I'll give you part 2 on Wednesday. But you're going to help me by doing some reading and some discovery about Nanogenmo. So this is a event that happens every year in November for the month of November. It is a parody of NaNoWriMo, or National Novel Writing Month, which I know some of you are creative writing majors. Perhaps you've participated in NaNoWriMo or some different versions of that. But Nanogenmo is its own thing, and it's pretty fun. I've done this a few times, and I've written a bit about it. So this is the tweet that started it all. This is Darius Kazemi, and he just tweeted in November 1st, 2013, "Hey, who wants to join me in Nanogenmo? Spend the month writing code that generates a 50K word novel. Share the novel and the code at the end." And as you can see, it got some retweets and likes, and enough people thought it was a good idea that they got it started. The way that this is shared, actually, before I share an example of it, I'll actually show you the page. The way that this proceeds is through GitHub, and GitHub is a repository, kind of a socially oriented, almost like a social network for code, or people sharing code projects. And usually what you would do if you had a piece of software that you wrote, you wanted to make it open source, you would make a repository for your software project, and then put the code into that repository, and other people could interact with it. They could either use it or make versions of it that they could improve on and help you fix bugs and things like that. So that's what most people use GitHub for. But for Nanogenmo, they essentially, the way Darius originally set it up, and then now as it continues, is to use, so the repository is for the event, for that year's event, and then the people file issues, which are basically bug reports, on the repository, but they use these more as, these are not bug reports, these are individuals' contributions. So it basically is using GitHub like a forum or a message board. And so what you see here are completed works from the 2020 running of Nanogenmo. I've actually got a pretty big database of these, but I have not updated my database to include 2020 yet. So I can tell you a few things without being super precise. Like, I can say that there are over 600 novels that have been generated within Nanogenmo since 2013. Something like 300 people have participated, have completed a novel. It's gotten different kinds of press coverage and different kinds of academic attention, but it's a real kind of event in terms of computational creativity, and I think it's really exciting every year. Like, I look forward to November, and I've contributed several times. I've got several in here. But let me just kind of orient you to it a little bit. So these are issues, and each of these is going to be basically a forum post. And when they have the completed tag, that means that someone was actually able to complete their submission. So if you look at this one, so just skip mine for now, but let's see. I really liked this one. This one is, I don't know this person, but what they've created is a book that is generated by somehow listening to the output of a Super Mario Brothers emulator, and then creating like prose description of what Mario is doing as that proceeds, and it's readable. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's actually really entertaining. You will find a lot of different approaches, and that's really what the sort of cutting edge is in Nanogenmo, is like coming up with new methods for generating text or new ways of doing it. So because the basic premise is actually very easy. Like, the basic threshold is actually very easy to accomplish, and it is considered completely valid and fine to do this, which is, you could write this kind of code. This is a 50,000 word novel that I came up with in about 5 minutes this morning, and here's the complete code for it. This is Python, and in case you don't know what Python is doing here, the first line prints the title, which is inside the beehive. And then what I'm saying on line 2 is for an iterator in range 50,000, so this is going to run code 50,000 times, is going to print the word buzz. And so this will be a novel that consists of 50,000 words. Each of those words is the word buzz, but it counts. And I mean, that would be a complete submission for Nanogenmo. And it's not a very good submission, but it is, people take it like that. That's fine. It would earn me a completed tag in terms of how Nanogenmo presents these things. So that's all it has to be. So what's fun about that is that it's a pretty low threshold if you're even like a novice computer programmer. But then the challenge is like, well, what else can you do, right? Because it's so easy to be successful at that. Let's try to really kick it up and do something really bizarre or unusual. And you see a lot of interesting approaches to generating text, interesting ideas of which text to generate and different sources people use to generate text. You will see a lot of Moby Dick in this, because if you ask people off the top of their head, think of a novel, a lot of people think of Moby Dick. And one way to approach this is to take some existing novel and then mess it up somehow. Do something like the travesty generator process that I mentioned a little while ago, to make a remixed version of Moby Dick. There's actually a bunch of Moby Dick riffs, which I think are very interesting. And that's a theme. The other one is Pride and Prejudice. So it's like Moby Dick, Pride and Prejudice are by far the most common books to do something with or manipulate in this kind of way. Oops, what was that? There's a bunch here, and you can sort them by clicking on the completed tag, and you'll see that this is now searching for all the completed books. So this is showing us that there are 56 issues that are marked completed. Some of these might have multiple books in them, but this is telling us that there are at least 56 completed books in Nanogenmo 2020. And so what I would like for you to do is take a look through these. I've got a link to this particular URL, so I'll go ahead and share this in Discord, but it's also linked in the assignment description and in the Google Doc that I'll show you momentarily. Here's the link for submissions. And what I'd like for you to do is take a look through these, find one that you think is interesting, and read about it. Read it if you can. Some of these you might not be able to get access to, or they might actually be illegible. Like, there's different reasons why you might not actually be able to read these. But try to read them if you can, or at least to get the idea. And then if you will, please add them to the Google Doc that I created this morning. So I need to pull it up here. I'll show you what to do with it. This is it, I think. Yeah. I shared this in Canvas as a collaboration. So you'll see it if you go to the collaborations thing, which is where you can also find the link to the notes document. So it's the same system of sharing. If you click on it and it doesn't give you access, then you should be able to use that screen to request access. Or if you see it, if you can see it but not edit it, then I forget how it looks, but there's somewhere in the access settings where you can request access, or just email me and let me know. But try to use the system within Gmail, within Google Docs, because it'll be a quicker process for me. To populate this, or to show you an example, I went ahead and filled in a row for one of my contributions from 2020, and just to give you an example of what I'm looking for each of these rows. Try not to duplicate. So if you see an entry, if you find one that's interesting, check to see if it's already been added before you spend much time on it, just because I like for these to be unique rows. So try to avoid duplications if we can, just to kind of get more covered. But yeah, so this is the title, this is the author, which is me. In some cases, you might not know the author's real name, so just use their GitHub name if you see it. So for example, this is the 165 Days of Christmas by Savitz. So just mention, Savitz. In this case, yeah, the K Savitz. Sometimes people on GitHub will share their complete names. But then this is the URL to the issue. So for this one, if I were going to add this one, the 165 Days of Christmas, this would be the URL that I would copy. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. Yeah, so copy that and then paste that in here, like so. And I will delete that in case anyone else wants to do it, but that's the idea. And then just describe it. It doesn't have to be long, like a tweet-sized description of this would be great, like I did here for mine. Just a couple sentences. I am kind of evaluating my work, and I do find it, this is true, I do find it really compelling, but you may not, but that's the one that I added. So I made sure to acknowledge that I am the one who added this. Okay, so that's it is 11, so I need to wrap it up. But for the class stream, I will be doing this lecture again in a few minutes, 20 minutes for section 2. But I got through a lot. I'm pretty close to done with my actual slides that I said. Yeah, I guess I am. That was pretty good. So part 2 of this lecture will be Wednesday. It'll still be an in-person, split in-person and Zoom kind of day. But it won't be a full lecture that day. There will be discussion and other activities. But that's I will mainly be talking about Nanogenmo on Wednesday. But you will be exploring Nanogenmo on your own first to help you kind of be prepared for that conversation and lecture on Wednesday. Okay, thanks for watching, everyone. If you have any questions about the homework or if you need access to this, let me know. Remember, Wikipedians, I'll send you your assignments tonight. And there's an optional workshop tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow afternoon and Thursday morning, and those will be on Zoom. Okay, bye everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. It's rainy, but I guess I can switch to the. Oh, there is a bird there. I don't know if you can see it because it's far away, but I'll switch to the bird cam for a few minutes. So, bye everyone.